Namaste. The process of breathing can be accounted for in multiple ways. We can look toward a more chemical definition of breathing. We can also look toward a more spiritual understanding of what the notion of breathing is. And so we can take that conversation into many different directions, those being two of the more common understandings and approaches to the notion of breath. What is sometimes not highlighted is the interconnection and influence that each of these different dynamics has on one another. For instance, when we take a look into the more chemical process of breathing, we look toward the process of respiration. Respiration can be accounted for in two different ways. We can look toward what is happening more on a chemical exchange level from the lungs, oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how the blood is influenced and a part of this particular process from a chemical level in moving oxygen throughout the body. That we might refer to as a more internal process of respiration. And then there's an external process of respiration, which is what's most commonly referred to as the process of breathing. We inhale, we, let's say, ingest oxygen. That gets carried to the lungs, and then there's an exchange that takes place through the blood. And exhalation, where we expel carbon dioxide that is moved to the lungs from the body. So there's an exchange that occurs from a more simple perspective. We often find our attention on that more external process of respiration being breathing. We inhale and we exhale. Then there is the spiritual implications of what the breath is. Many different traditions, spiritual practices, have some type of relationship to breath. As an example, we might point toward pranayama as the fourth limb of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali as an example of how breath is integrated into a type of practice that we would label as a spiritual practice. What I would like to try to articulate here is that both are occurring at the same level. When we embark upon some type of breathing practice using a particular technique, both of those two things are taking place. The chemical process of respiration and that physical process of the external part where we are inhaling and exhaling, that we, to an extent, have some type of control over through focus and conscious attention. And with particular techniques, we can start to harness and adhere to different spiritual traditions that are in some sense cultivating a specific type of spiritual practice that might be pertinent to us. So that's an idea that I would like each of us to explore. What's happening physically is also transpiring in another way, of which might bring about different types of meaning and associated purpose relative to the techniques that we choose to use. And in this case, with the example of pranayama, using specific types of breathing techniques to exercise and ascertain a particular goal on the way to, in the tradition of yoga, this process of stilling the activities and the fluctuations of mind. One particular type of breath that I would like to bring everybody's attention to is this notion of the even breath. And it's a really great way of exercising a type of awareness on the physical body in relationship to that more chemical process of respiration and the external process of respiration, breathing. And we've gone into this previously, But to recap, it's this idea of placing the attention on the inhalation, stemming from the abdomen, the belly, and then placing the attention on the exhalation, where the belly, the abdomen moves back toward neutral. And we can spend a few moments just in a natural seated position where the spine is in an upright, stable, comfortable position, just exploring that sense of evenness, balance, and from again a more bodily, physical perspective, homeostasis. So as I inhale, I'm trying to lengthen out my email in a way where it's not causing too much strain. And then I want my exhalation to be the same length as that inhale. And I might go around 4 to 5 counts. And I might spend a minute or so doing that and just noticing how I'm feeling. And a couple of questions that I might start to ask myself when I move into this even breath are, where am I breathing? How am I breathing? And what is this process of breathing doing in terms of how does it make me feel? Maybe the breath is situated a little bit more up in and around the chest, and maybe that's making or producing the sensation that we might refer to as a little bit of anxiety. Maybe we can use that as an indication for, can we move the breath more down into the belly and allow the diaphragm to move a little bit more freely via that belly breath? And then maybe there's a shift in what we start to feel because of that slight shift in orientation where we are now changing the way in which we're using that breath. It's bringing about maybe slightly different sensations and feelings than we might be commonly used to. So there's the where, and there's the how, and then there's also the indication of what is it that we're doing? What are we breathing? And that notion of the what that we're breathing is maybe a slightly more philosophical discussion that some of us may like or not like to have. And that has to do with this idea of the breath evolves. Through each inhale that we take and exhale that we take, there's this idea that the next cycle of breath is going to build from that previous incantation or incarnation of the breath. And then alternatively, there's this notion of the involutionary process of the breath. This idea of ingesting or taking in that which is outside. And so with the breath, there is this relationship, dialectic that's taking place between inner and outer. And sometimes with the breath, those two things get a little bit blurred. What is inner can also constitute what's outer. We can refer to this exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, inhalation, exhalation that makes way for the other. But the most important thing with the breath is that we start to recognize that the breath takes us into this place of presence. When I'm able to feel into my breath, I'm able to feel into what's taking place in the moment. And that's a very powerful gift that the breath affords us. Using the even breath, an even inhale and an even exhale to potentially cultivate a relationship with the fact that I am breathing. And this is a process that brings me forward through life. A little explanation into the notion of breath. and playing with this idea of the double. Spiritual implications, just as there are chemical, physiological implications, and how those two things are intertwined in some of these practices that we might start to do on a slightly more consistent basis. Namaste, and take care.